Hmm. Let's analyze that, Chris, because I want to hear your thoughts on the fact that NVIDIA and AMD are going to be sharing 15% of their Chinese revenue with the US government in return for licenses to sell the H20 and MI308 chips there. You may recall those chips were specifically banned from being sold to Chinese markets. Of course, everyone's favorite president brokered this deal. It's quite unusual because I can't remember in recent memory when a corporation paid the US government a cut of their profits. But it is highly beneficial because it lets both companies keep a foothold in the Chinese market and avoids letting them lose ground to companies like Huawei. Although there is the possibility there could be future levies. The agreement highlights the strategic importance of semiconductors while leaving China torn between its need for advanced chips and its frustration over added costs and political concerns. I will also note that in a news article released this week, China says they don't want the H20 anywhere near any of their sensitive government data for some reason or another. So, Chris, I have to ask, given what happened with Intel and given this news, do you think it's bribery like I do?
Well, the only good thing about this potential bribery is that the money is going to the government and not, at least what we've seen publicly, into any individual pockets, right? So this 15% is going to be paid into the U.S. It's basically a tax. I guess it's not really a tariff since it's not being levied at the board. It's for exports, not imports. But anyway, there is money coming into the U.S. for this, and it probably at least helps NVIDIA and AMD, right? So if you look at the NVIDIA case in particular, uh, last quarter, I think they said that they lost somewhere between like 4.5 and 5.5 billion dollars on not being able to sell H20 chips into China. And Jensen Huang came out and said this is going to cost us over the next 2 or 3 years $50 billion. So I'm sure that he is breathing a sigh of relief, and maybe the NVIDIA shareholders as well, that this is going to end up costing quite a bit less. There's a really good chance, despite what the Chinese government has said, that the H20 chip is going to grow rapidly in the Chinese market and potentially make up something like 70% of NVIDIA's market share in China fairly rapidly. So even with a 15% tax, tariff, fee, bribe on top of that, it's still going to do quite well for both NVIDIA and their shareholders. And as you said, this also hopefully moves NVIDIA or continues to move NVIDIA into a place where their chips are being used in AI applications, even in China. I think the outright ban has a potential to split the market, right? Where we see AI development happening completely separately in two different parts of the world. Now, there are other geopolitical concerns here, right? I mean, is this just a money thing where selling the chips matters only because of the money that's going to come back to the US? Or does this matter because selling the chips allows China and their companies to get a foothold up on AI? There's some interesting questions that I don't have answers, whether this is the right move or not from the AI arms race perspective, call it. I do think that, as you mentioned, kind of related back to the Intel thing, that this is probably a sign of things to come. I think there's a pretty good prospect that we will see additional individual company deals with the U.S. government, with the U.S. president. What that means exactly, I'm not sure, but I do think we will see this to continue. Some places where I think some folks might be worried is in smaller organizations. If you're not the CEO of Intel, if you're not running NVIDIA, if you're not running AMD, and you just happen to be beholden to these other big tariffs and you can't find a way to do a deal with the president of the United States to get out of it, what does that mean? What does that mean for our economy? Only something like, I think it's like 20%, 18% of the US population is employed by Fortune 50 companies. So most of us work for smaller businesses that may not have the ability to show up like Tim Cook did with a bar of gold and some glass after making some significant investments in the US to bring Apple back in terms with the president. So the fallout here could be widespread. It's also possible that we'll just all get rich off of NVIDIA stock because they can now sell the H20 into China. Lots to be determined there.